Turning to the UK now, where the government is working on an extensive list of Russian oligarchs who will be subject to additional sanctions. Downing Street already imposed restrictions on several businesses and billionaires with links to the leadership in Moscow. Those people will be unable to travel to the UK, and any UK-based assets will be frozen. 8 individuals who are part of Putin's inner circle were recently added to the sanctions list. They include the president's former son-in-law, Kirill Shamalov. Now the UK wants to go after the $2 billion in real estate, mainly in London, owned by other Russian billionaires close to Putin. Meanwhile, the EU has added Russia's richest man, Alexei Mordashov, to its list of sanctioned individuals. He's the biggest shareholder in the London-listed travel service firm TUI. While Mordashov hasn't been sanctioned by the UK, his businesses in the region will be severely curtailed. Let's turn now to Vicky Pryce, a board member at the Center for Economics and Business Research in London. Welcome back to the program, Vicky. Now, the UK government's fast-tracked legislation for these more precise sanctions on Russian billionaires close to Putin. How much pressure will this put on the government in Moscow?
I think it is putting pressure because it's adding to everything else that has happened. And we've seen how the EU has put sanctions on even more people, perhaps, than the UK has so far. So that could be followed by similar sanctions in the UK as well. But it does send a signal that Russian money isn't particularly welcome. And we already know that the golden visa has gone. We also know now through this new bill that property owners are going to have to really declare their assets and who they are, so that you can't hide behind companies, and it's going to go back to properties bought over the last 20 years. It isn't really going to affect particularly what Russia does in relation to the Ukraine, but it does just add to everything else that's happening, with banks also being sanctioned, with some banks, in fact, leaving the EU completely because they can't operate any longer. But crucially, I think, you just talked about what's happening in the oil market. That's what's going to still be sustaining Russia in its war in the Ukraine, because oil prices, of course, are going up, and they are a significant exporter still of both oil and gas.
Right, as you say there, the stated goal is to punish Moscow financially for its attack in Ukraine. So can this be achieved at all if the West doesn't go after Russia's crude exports?
I think it would be difficult, although, of course, we're already seeing that there are problems internally. I mean, the ruble has fallen very significantly. Interest rates have gone up very significantly. So that isn't easy for a country. And indeed, it could affect a number of financial institutions in Russia. And we know also, additionally, that companies are exiting or trying to exit their investments in Russia. And what we're seeing, of course, is that Russia has, for the moment, not allowed any of those assets to be sold in the domestic market, which really means that for the moment they can't exit, they're still there. And that will be more a long-term issue for Russia if that investment that it needs, the country needs, because it's trying to diversify. It hasn't quite managed it. It's still very dependent on oil and gas. But that investment is actually quite important for ensuring that Russia grows reasonably in the future. So that is also another factor that will be affecting Russia. But while oil prices stay high, then the military effort and the support perhaps still for what is going on in Russia internally may continue. But domestically, I think there are likely to be quite a lot of concerns about how the economy will function in the short and medium term.
Vicky, looking at high oil prices, as you mentioned there, how close are we to seeing oil prices go too high that it leads to a drop in overall consumer demand and business demand around the world?
I think everyone is already calculating their forecast for this year for Western countries and the world as a whole. There is no doubt that oil prices at this level mean much higher inflation for everyone. So we were all hoping that perhaps a peak of 7.5% here would, by April, we thought would then start coming down in terms of inflation, but it could well go up even further. That puts huge squeeze on incomes, and that's similarly the case in the US and also in Europe. The US already has 7.5% inflation and is likely to be going higher. So energy prices matter hugely, but also food prices more generally, because, of course, export of wheat, which comes from Russia and the Ukraine, that we've already seen wheat prices go up significantly. Plus, of course, exports of iron ore, steel, minerals that also come from Russia, and they will also be disrupted. One assumes that prices are going up there too. So yes, it's not just the oil price. It's a general inflationary environment which is bound to lead to consumers being squeezed and, of course, businesses as well having their input costs go up. So yes, I think it is costs for everybody, I'm afraid, in this scenario that we're living through.
All right. Vicky Pryce from the CEBR in London. Thank you for joining the show.